The sun was setting over the dusty plains of the Wild West as Jack Ironwood Matthews rode into the small town of Red Brook. His horse's hooves kicked up clouds of dry dust, and the long shadows of the evening stretched across the wooden buildings. Jack was a cowboy of legend, known for his sharp aim and tough nature. He wasn't just another gunman. He was a man who had survived countless battles in the wilderness, outsmarting even the deadliest of foes. His reputation had spread far and wide, and he had earned the respect of every town he passed through. Red Brook was a quiet, sleepy little town, but the arrival of Jack Matthews quickly changed that. The saloon, the heart of the town's entertainment, was buzzing with excitement. Cowboys, ranchers, and even a few travelers had gathered, all eager to see the famous gunslinger. The men at the bar were laughing and shouting, sharing stories of their own adventures, but all of them paused when the door opened, and Jack walked in. He didn't look like much. Tall, lean with a weather-beaten face and a thick, dark beard. His eyes were sharp, but there was a quietness about him. He wasn't here for fun, he wasn't here to make friends, he was here for business. He nodded at a few men in the saloon, then walked straight to the bar and ordered a whiskey. But it wasn't just Jack's presence that had the men whispering. There was another reason for their interest. Carl Harrington, the town's owner and self-proclaimed leader, had a plan. He was a man who liked to entertain himself at others' expense, and Jack Matthews seemed like the perfect target for his next joke. Harrington had recently captured a young Cheyenne girl in a dispute over trading rights. Her name was Kiowa, and she was known for her fierce spirit. She had been brought into town by force, and now Harrington had a cruel idea. He would offer her as a gift to Jack Matthews, knowing that the tough cowboy would be forced into an awkward situation. The plan was simple. Harrington would present the girl as if she were a prize, a token of respect. But what he didn't expect was the strong reaction it would cause. "Jack," Harrington called from across the saloon, a grin stretching across his face. He motioned for the cowboy to come over. Jack's gaze flickered toward the man, but he made no move to approach. Finally, with a sigh, Jack stood and made his way to where Harrington stood, an air of indifference surrounding him. "What's this about?" Jack asked, raising an eyebrow as he looked at the young woman standing beside Harrington. Kiowa stood tall, with long black hair that cascaded over her shoulders. Her eyes were dark and intense, and she held herself with a dignity that seemed out of place in a town like Red Brook. She wore simple clothes, but there was something about the way she carried herself that made her seem like a warrior, a force to be reckoned with. "She's yours, Jack," Harrington said with a smirk. "A little prize for a man who's done so much for the West. I thought you might like her. A gift from me, of course." He stepped back and motioned to Kiowa like she was a piece of livestock. Jack's face darkened. He didn't like the way Harrington was treating the woman. It didn't matter that she was Cheyenne, or that she was caught in a dispute. The joke wasn't funny to him. "I don't want anything from you, Harrington," Jack growled, turning to walk away. But before he could take another step, Kiowa spoke. Her voice was calm but firm, and it carried across the saloon. "I'm not a prize," she said, her words cutting through the laughter and chatter of the room. Jack stopped. He turned back to face her, and for a moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Her eyes locked onto his, and there was a fire in them, a fierce and unyielding spirit. She wasn't broken. She wasn't scared. She was strong, and something about her words struck Jack deeply. Harrington chuckled, clearly thinking the girl was trying to save face. "Oh, she's got spirit, doesn't she? But don't worry, Jack, you'll have no trouble handling her." He turned to Kiowa with a dismissive wave. "You're lucky, girl. A man like Jack Matthews can handle anything." Jack didn't reply. He didn't even glance at Harrington. Instead, his attention was focused entirely on Kiowa. Her words had stirred something in him. He could see the pride in her eyes, and it made him respect her instantly. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, especially not in such a bold way. "I'm not here for your games, Harrington," Jack said slowly, his voice low. "And I don't want any woman you're offering." He walked toward the door, but as he reached for the handle, Kiowa spoke again. "If you're so quick to leave, then you don't know the first thing about real strength," she said, her voice unwavering. Jack paused. He didn't turn around. The words felt like a challenge, and something in him, something deep down, told him that this wasn't over. He stepped back, his boots echoing on the wooden floor as he walked slowly toward her. "I don't know what kind of games you're playing, girl, but I don't like them," he said. his voice growing more intense. Kiowa's eyes met his, and there was a certain understanding there, an understanding that made Jack's blood run a little hotter. She wasn't scared. She wasn't backing down. In fact, she was standing there, proud and unshaken, as if she had nothing to fear. "I'm not playing any games, cowboy," she said softly. "I'm simply telling you the truth. You fight like a man who only knows how to kill, but there are other ways to fight, ways that don't involve bloodshed." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He had spent his whole life fighting with his fists and his gun, but this was different. This woman, this girl, was challenging him in a way that no one ever had. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt a stirring of something unfamiliar, a curiosity, a spark of something more. Harrington saw the way Jack was looking at Kiowa and smiled, thinking he was winning. "You see, Jack? She'll be good for you. Just like a good horse, she'll learn to obey." Jack turned sharply to face Harrington. His voice was cold, but there was a fire in his eyes. "Don't ever talk about her like that again. She's not a thing to be trained. And you're right about one thing, I don't know the first thing about real strength. But I'm going to find out, and it won't be because of any joke you're playing." With that, Jack turned on his heel and walked out of the saloon, leaving behind a stunned and silent room. His mind was racing, but his heart was calm. The challenge had been made. Kiowa wasn't just a girl caught in a bad situation. She was something more. And Jack Matthews, the hardened cowboy, had a feeling that his life was about to change in a way he couldn't even imagine. That night, as the town settled into its usual quiet, Jack lay awake in his room. His thoughts kept drifting back to Kiowa, her words, her gaze, the quiet strength in her that seemed to match his own. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a cruel joke. There was something deeper here, something that called to him in ways he didn't understand. And for the first time in a long while, Jack Matthews was unsure of what the next step in his journey would be. But one thing was certain, he wasn't done with Kiowa yet. The days following Jack's encounter with Kiowa were filled with uneasy silence. Jack tried to forget about her, to push her out of his mind, but every time he closed his eyes, her face lingered there. Her words echoed in his ears. "You fight like a man who only knows how to kill, but there are other ways to fight." Jack was a gunslinger, a cowboy, but he had never stopped to question the way he lived. Until now. The town of Red Brook returned to its normal rhythm, the sun rising and setting over the dry plains. Jack had come here for some rest, but it seemed like rest was far from what he would get. Days turned into weeks, and he found himself walking past the saloon, catching glimpses of Kiowa. She was always at the edge of the crowd, watching, learning. The local bandits had become a growing problem in the area, and Jack had heard enough talk in the saloon to know that something had to be done. But when the townspeople, including Carl Harrington, came to him asking for help, Jack knew the situation was more complicated than it seemed. He couldn't help but wonder if the real enemy wasn't the bandits, but the way people treated each other, especially people like Kiowa. One evening, as Jack was cleaning his revolver on the porch of the town's general store, he was approached by a familiar face. "Jack," Kiowa said, her voice calm but carrying an authority Jack hadn't expected. "I need to speak with you." Jack looked up at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had never expected her to come to him directly. After all, she was still bound to this town by whatever agreement Carl had made, and yet, here she was, standing before him as though she had every right to be. "Go ahead," Jack said gruffly, motioning for her to sit beside him. "I'm listening." Kiowa didn't sit. She remained standing, her posture strong and proud. "The bandits that have been raiding this town aren't just common thieves," she began. "They're part of a larger group that has been causing problems across the plains. Their leader is a man named Red Wolf. He's dangerous, and if you think that shooting your way through this problem will solve anything, you're wrong." Jack's eyes widened slightly. "How do you know all this?" Kiowa's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Jack saw a flash of something deeper in her eyes. Anger, maybe, but also something else. She wasn't afraid. "I've been tracking them for weeks," she replied. "Red Wolf and his men are smart. They don't just rob. They burn towns, destroy crops, and leave no trace behind. If you go in guns blazing, they'll turn this whole town into a graveyard." Jack stood up, his mind racing. He was used to fighting with his gun. It was all he knew. But now Kiowa was telling him to think differently, to stop fighting the way he had always fought. "I'm not a strategist," Jack said after a pause. I'm a man with a gun. That's how I've survived, Kiowa met his eyes. And you've survived because you're good at it. But there are things you don't see. I've been fighting my whole life. I've seen how people like Red Wolf manipulate fear. The only way to stop them is by outsmarting them. Jack hesitated, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He was used to fighting with his fists with his revolver. But this felt different. This wasn't just a gunfight. This was something much larger. And it wasn't just his battle to win. I don't know if I can do it that way, Jack said quietly. Kiowa's eyes softened just a little. You don't have to do it alone, Jack. I can help you. It was the first time she had offered to work with him, and the idea felt strange. But as Jack stood there, looking into her eyes, something inside him stirred. She wasn't asking him to fight for her. She was asking him to fight alongside her, to work as partners. Over the next few days, Jack and Kiowa began to plan. Kiowa shared everything she knew about Red Wolf and his men, and together, they devised a strategy to deal with the bandits without resorting to violence. They would use the land to their advantage, outsmart the bandits by luring them into a trap. While Jack wasn't fully convinced at first, the more he listened to Kiowa, the more he realized she was right. Her knowledge of the land, her understanding of how to read people and situations, was something he had never learned in all his years as a cowboy. He had always relied on his gun, but Kiowa relied on her mind and her instincts, and now Jack was starting to trust her. The night before the confrontation, they camped just outside Red Brook. Jack lay on the ground staring up at the stars. The night was still, peaceful even, but underneath the calm there was a sense of tension. Tomorrow they would face Red Wolf and his men. Kiowa sat beside the campfire, her eyes staring into the flames. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned to Jack, her face lit by the firelight. Do you ever wonder what would happen if you stopped fighting, Jack? She asked softly. If you stopped trying to control everything and let the world unfold the way it's meant to? Jack didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure how to answer. He had spent his whole life trying to control things with his gun, trying to force the world to bend to his will, but in this moment, with Kiowa beside him, he felt like there was another way. I don't know, he said finally. I've always been a fighter. I never thought about letting things unfold. Kiowa smiled faintly, her eyes softening. Maybe you don't need to control everything, Jack. Maybe you just need to trust. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the plains, casting long shadows on the ground. Jack and Kiowa stood at the edge of the town, waiting for the bandits to arrive. They had set their trap, using their knowledge of the land to create an ambush. The bandits would come expecting an easy victory, but they had no idea what they were walking into. When Red Wolf and his men appeared, they seemed confident, their horses kicking up dust as they rode into the trap. Jack and Kiowa watched from their hiding place, waiting for the perfect moment. As the bandits drew closer, Kiowa's eyes never left Red Wolf. She whispered to Jack, her voice steady. Wait for it. Wait for the signal. Finally, with a single nod from Kiowa, Jack pulled the rope, triggering a series of distractions that sent the bandits scrambling. The fight wasn't what they expected. It wasn't guns blazing, but a well-coordinated plan that outsmarted them at every turn. The bandits were caught off guard, their leader quickly disarmed and taken captive. By the end of the day, the threat to Red Brook was over. The town was safe, and Jack had done something he never thought possible. He had won without firing a shot. It wasn't just a victory for the town. It was a victory for him, too. He had fought a different kind of battle, one that didn't require violence or bloodshed. As Jack stood next to Kiowa, looking at the captured bandits, he realized something. He had found a partner, not just in battle, but in life. Kiowa had shown him a new way to fight, a way that relied on his mind as much as his body. And in that moment, he knew that their journey together was just beginning. Kiowa turned to him, her expression unreadable. You did well, Jack. You trusted me. Jack nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. I think I'm starting to understand, Kiowa. Maybe there's more to this life than just fighting. Kiowa smiled, her eyes twinkling. There's always more. As the sun set over the plains, Jack and Kiowa stood side by side, ready for whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jack was certain of one thing. He wasn't alone. And with Kiowa by his side, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead.